The floodwaters had risen faster than anyone expected, turning the peaceful Green Vale River into a churning brown monster that swallowed everything in its path. Fletcher Lawson had been securing his livestock when he heard the cry, not quite human, deeper and rougher, but unmistakably desperate. He abandoned the last of the fence posts and ran toward the sound, his boots splashing through ankle-deep water that was rising by the second. There, caught against a massive oak tree that had somehow remained rooted despite the torrent, was a figure struggling against the current. Fletcher did not hesitate. He grabbed the rope from his belt, the one he always carried for emergencies just like this, and waded into the deeper water. The current immediately tried to claim him, but he was a large man, built solid from years of working his farm, and he fought his way forward. When he reached the tree, he realized what he was saving: green skin, tusks protruding from her lower jaw, pointed ears plastered back against her skull, an orc woman, her eyes wide with terror as the water threatened to pull her under. For a heartbeat, Fletcher froze. Everything he had been taught since childhood screamed at him to turn back. Orcs were dangerous. Orcs were the enemy. Orcs had raided human settlements for generations. But then her hand slipped on the bark, and she went under for a moment before clawing her way back up, coughing and choking. Fletcher saw only a person drowning. He lunged forward, wrapping the rope around both of them, and began pulling them back toward higher ground. The orc woman grabbed onto him, her fingers digging into his shoulders with desperate strength that would leave bruises, but he did not complain. He just kept moving, one step at a time, fighting the current that wanted to sweep them both away. They collapsed together on the muddy hillside above the flood line, both gasping for breath. Fletcher lay on his back, his chest heaving, while beside him the orc woman coughed up river water and shook violently. He sat up slowly, looking down at the raging flood below. His farm was gone. The barn he had built with his father, the fields he had planted just weeks ago. All of it swallowed by brown water. A movement beside him made him turn. The orc woman had pushed herself up onto her knees. She was looking at him with dark amber eyes that held shock and something else, gratitude, perhaps, or disbelief. Then, to his utter surprise, she bowed forward until her forehead nearly touched the mud at his feet. "Stop," Fletcher said immediately, uncomfortable with the gesture. "Do not do that." She looked up at him, confusion crossing her broad features. Her skin was darker green than he had expected, almost emerald in the gray light of the storm. Her black hair hung in wet ropes around her face, and the two small tusks jutting up from her lower jaw gave her a fierce appearance that was somehow softened by the vulnerability in her eyes. "You saved my life," she said, her voice rough and accented but perfectly understandable. "I owe you everything." "You owe me nothing," Fletcher replied, getting to his feet and offering her his hand. She stared at it for a long moment, as if uncertain whether to take it. Finally, she placed her larger, calloused palm in his, and he pulled her up. She stood nearly as tall as he did, with broad shoulders and muscular arms. "The water saved neither of us any favors today. What is your name?" "Nara," she said quietly. "Nara Vorgath. Fletcher Lawson." He looked around at the devastation. The rain was still falling, though less violently now. "Where were you headed when the flood caught you?" Nara's expression darkened. "Anywhere away from my clan. They cast me out 3 days ago." Fletcher wanted to ask why, but the exhaustion on her face stopped him. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though he noticed her favoring her left leg. "Where?" "My farmhouse is on higher ground. If it is still standing, we can shelter there." He started walking, and after a moment's hesitation, she followed. The farmhouse had survived, though water lapped at the bottom steps of the porch. Fletcher had built on the highest point of his property precisely because of the occasional flooding. though nothing like this had happened in his lifetime. Inside, everything was still dry. He lit a fire in the hearth while Nara stood dripping by the door, looking uncomfortable and out of place. "There are dry clothes in the chest upstairs," Fletcher said. "They belonged to my sister before she married. They might fit you." Nara looked at him with surprise. "You would give me clothing? Would you rather catch your death in wet ones?" He hung his own soaked shirt over a chair to dry. "Go on. I will make something hot to drink." She climbed the stairs slowly, and Fletcher heard the floorboards creak overhead as she moved around. He busied himself with tea, his mind racing. An orc woman, in his house. He should be afraid, or at least wary. But all he could think about was how terrified she had looked in the water, how her hands had shaken as she coughed up river water. When Nara came back downstairs, she was wearing one of his sister's old dresses, a simple brown wool that strained slightly across her broader shoulders but otherwise fit reasonably well. Her hair was still damp but no longer dripping, and she had tied it back from her face. Fletcher handed her a cup of tea, which she accepted with both hands. "Thank you," she said quietly. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. "Why did you save me?" Fletcher considered the question. "Because you needed saving. I am an orc. I noticed. Your people hate mine." "We hate yours. It is the way of things." Fletcher looked at her directly. "Then maybe the way of things is wrong." Nara stared at him as if he had grown a second head. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally said, "You are very strange for a human." "So I have been told." He managed a tired smile. "You should rest. Take the bed upstairs. I will sleep down here by the fire." "I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will. You are injured and you have been through an ordeal." When she looked ready to protest again, he added, "Please, it would make me feel better." She searched his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Just for tonight. Tomorrow I will leave." "Tomorrow we will see what is left after the flood," Fletcher corrected gently. "Then we can worry about what comes next." Nara climbed the stairs again, and Fletcher heard the bed creak as she lay down. He settled into his father's old chair by the fire, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, and listened to the rain slowly fade to nothing. Outside, the flood waters continued their rampage. Inside, against all logic and reason, he had given shelter to someone his people would call an enemy. Morning brought clear skies and a landscape transformed. Fletcher stood on his porch and surveyed the damage. Water still covered most of his fields, though it had receded enough to reveal the skeletal remains of his barn jutting up like broken bones. Debris was scattered everywhere: tree branches, pieces of buildings from upstream, even the carcass of some unfortunate animal. Behind him, Nara emerged from the house. She had found his mother's old apron and tied it over the dress. "The water is still too high to leave," she observed. "It will take days to drain," Fletcher agreed. "Maybe a week. Then I will work." When he looked at her questioningly, she continued, "You saved my life. I will not sit idle while you repair what the flood destroyed. Let me help." Fletcher wanted to argue, but the determined set of her jaw told him it would be pointless. "All right, but first breakfast." They ate together at his small kitchen table: bread, cheese, and dried meat from his stores. Nara ate with efficient hunger, and Fletcher found himself studying her when she was not looking. There was a scar across her left forearm, old and white against her green skin. Her hands were work-worn, the hands of someone who knew labor. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. "Sorry," Fletcher said. "I have never actually talked to an orc before." "And I have spoken to very few humans," Nara replied. "Mostly across battlefield lines, and those conversations involved more shouting." "Were you a warrior?" Her expression darkened. "I was, until I refused to raid a human settlement. There were children there, Fletcher. Little ones." My war leader said it did not matter, that all humans were the enemy. I could not do it, so they cast me out. Fletcher felt something twist in his chest. That took courage. It took foolishness, Nara said bitterly. Now I have no clan, no place, no purpose. You have purpose today, Fletcher said firmly. Today we start cleaning up, tomorrow too, and the day after that. One day at a time. They worked throughout the morning, clearing debris from around the house and the outbuildings that still stood. Nara was incredibly strong, lifting logs that Fletcher would have struggled with and carrying them to a pile they were building for firewood. She barely spoke except to ask where he wanted things, but Fletcher noticed she watched him carefully, as if waiting for him to suddenly turn on her. By midday, the sun was hot and they both needed a break. Fletcher brought out cold water and more bread, and they sat on the porch steps together. Nara had rolled up her sleeves, and Fletcher could see more scars on her arms, the marks of a warrior's life. How long have you had this farm? Nara asked. It was my father's before me. He died 2 winters ago. My mother passed when I was young. Fletcher looked out at his drowned fields. I have worked this land my whole life. I thought I would pass it to my own children someday. You have no wife, not yet. Most of the women in the village think I am too quiet or too boring. He gave a self-deprecating shrug. I am just a farmer, not much to offer. Nara was quiet for a moment. You offered your life to save a stranger. That is not nothing. Fletcher felt heat rise to his face and changed the subject. What about you? Did you have someone in your clan? No. Orc warriors are expected to be strong, fierce, dedicated only to battle. Love is considered a weakness. She said the words matter-of-factly, but Fletcher heard something hollow underneath. I never agreed with that either. They worked through the afternoon, and by evening they had cleared most of the immediate area around the house. Fletcher's back ached and his hands were blistered, but it felt good to be doing something productive. Nara moved with a slight limp still, but she never complained, never stopped until he called an end to the work. That night, Fletcher insisted on making dinner. Nara sat at the table and watched him move around the kitchen with bemused curiosity. You cook? She asked. Someone has to. Do orc men not cook? Orc men believe it beneath them. She paused. You are not what I expected. Neither are you, Fletcher admitted, setting bowls of stew on the table. I was taught that orcs were brutal and mindless, but you are neither of those things. And I was taught that humans were weak and cruel, yet you are neither. They ate in companionable silence, and Fletcher found himself relaxing in her presence. There was something calming about Nara, despite her intimidating appearance. She was direct and honest, without the games and pretenses that he often encountered in his dealings with the village folk. After dinner, Nara moved toward the stairs, but Fletcher stopped her. Would you like to sit by the fire for a while? It gets lonely here sometimes, talking only to myself. Nara considered, then nodded. They settled into chairs on opposite sides of the hearth, and Fletcher found himself telling her about his childhood, about learning to farm from his father, about his sister who had married a merchant and moved to the coast. Nara listened intently and eventually began sharing her own stories about growing up in an orc clan, about learning to fight, about the strange honor code that governed their warriors. We are not so different, Fletcher said eventually. Your people and mine, we both want to protect what is ours. We both value strength and courage. But we have been at war for so long, no one remembers why it started, Nara said softly. Just that we are supposed to hate each other. I do not hate you. Nara met his eyes across the fire. I do not hate you either, Fletcher Lawson. Something shifted between them in that moment, though neither spoke of it. Eventually, Nara rose and climbed the stairs to bed, and Fletcher settled into his chair, but sleep was slow to come. The days fell into a pattern. They woke with the sun, ate together, and worked side by side to restore what the flood had destroyed. The water gradually receded, revealing the full extent of the damage. Fletcher's barn was a total loss. Half of his fences were gone, and his carefully planted crops were ruined. But with Nara's help, he began to rebuild. She proved to be skilled with her hands, able to handle heavy timber and help him frame out a new barn structure. Fletcher taught her the finer points of carpentry, and she picked it up quickly. They talked as they worked, sharing more stories, more of themselves. Fletcher learned that Nara loved watching the stars, that she had a beautiful singing voice she rarely used, that she was terrified of spiders despite being a trained warrior. In turn, he shared his dreams for the farm, his secret love of reading, his complete inability to dance no matter how many times his sister had tried to teach him. Nara actually laughed at that, a deep, genuine sound that made Fletcher's heart skip. 2 weeks after the flood, a rider came up the road. Fletcher recognized him as Thomas from the village, a man who had never been particularly friendly. Thomas pulled his horse up short when he saw Nara standing beside Fletcher. "What in the name of all that is holy is that thing doing here?" Thomas demanded. Fletcher felt anger flash through him. "That is Nara, and she has been helping me rebuild. Show some respect." "Respect for an orc?" Thomas spat on the ground. "Have you lost your mind, Lawson? That creature will murder you in your sleep." "She has had 2 weeks to do so," Fletcher said coldly. "Instead, she has worked harder than any man I know. Now state your business or leave my property." Thomas's face reddened. "The village council sent me to check on you after the flood, but I will be telling them what I found here." "This is not natural, Fletcher. It is not right." "Then tell them," Fletcher said, "and tell them I do not care." Thomas wheeled his horse around and galloped away. Nara had remained silent throughout the exchange, but Fletcher could see the tension in her shoulders. "I should leave," she said quietly. "I am bringing trouble to you." "You are bringing nothing but help," Fletcher countered. "Thomas has always been a fool. I will not let him drive you away." "Fletcher, you do not understand. If your village learns I am here, they might come for both of us." "Let them come." He surprised himself with the fierceness in his voice. "I will not turn you out, Nara, not after everything we have been through together." She looked at him with those amber eyes, and he saw fear there, but also something else, something warm and uncertain. "Why are you doing this? Why risk so much for me?" Fletcher took a step closer to her. "Because when I look at you, I do not see an orc. I see someone brave and kind and strong. I see someone who makes me laugh, who works beside me without complaint, who has brought light into a house that has been lonely for too long." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "I see someone I care about." Nara's breath caught. "Fletcher, she stopped, shaking her head. "This cannot happen. You know it cannot." "Why not?" "Because I am what I am and you are what you are. The world will not allow it." "Then perhaps we need to show the world something different," Fletcher said softly. Before either of them could say more, the sound of horses reached them. Multiple horses, coming fast. Fletcher and Nara turned to see a group of riders approaching 10 men from the village, led by Thomas and the village headman, Marcus. "Step away from the orc, Fletcher," Marcus called out as they surrounded the property. Several of the men had bows drawn. Fletcher moved to stand in front of Nara. "No, do not be a fool," Marcus said, though his voice was not unkind. "We know you have been through much with the flood. Perhaps it has affected your judgment, but you cannot harbor an orc here. They are dangerous." "She has been here for 2 weeks and has not harmed anyone," Fletcher shot back. "She has done nothing but help me rebuild." "It is an orc," Thomas interjected. "It does not matter what it has done. It needs to leave or be dealt with." Nara put her hand on Fletcher's shoulder. "I will go," she said quietly. "Do not fight for me." "I will fight for you if I choose," Fletcher replied. He looked at the assembled men. "Listen to me, all of you. I know what we have been taught about orcs. I believed it too once. But Nara saved my livestock during the flood, helped me rebuild my home, and has shown me more loyalty than some humans I could name." He let his gaze rest on Thomas for that last part. "If you want to harm her, you will have to go through me first." Marcus sighed heavily. "Fletcher, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You are the ones pointing arrows at an unarmed woman who has committed no crime." "She is an orc on human land," Thomas said. "That is crime enough." "No," Fletcher said firmly. "That is just hatred, and I am done with it." The standoff might have turned violent if not for an unexpected interruption. Another rider came thundering up the road, Fletcher's sister, Eliza, her red hair flying behind her. She must have ridden hard from the coast when she heard about the flood. "Fletcher," she called, dismounting quickly. Then she saw the situation and put her hands on her hips. "What is going on here?" "Eliza, stay back," Marcus warned. "This does not concern you. Like hell it does not. That is my brother you are threatening." Eliza walked right up to the group of armed men without a trace of fear. She looked at Nara for a long moment, then at Fletcher. "Is this her? The one you mentioned in your letter?" Fletcher blinked. He had sent a letter to Eliza shortly after Nara arrived, telling her about the flood and, yes, mentioning his unusual house guest. "Yes. Eliza, this is Nara." Eliza studied Nara with the same directness she applied to everything in life. "Did you really help my brother save his farm?" Nara nodded slowly. "I tried to repay the debt of saving my life." "Good enough for me." Eliza turned to Marcus. "This woman has done nothing wrong. You are threatening innocent people." "She is an orc," Thomas repeated, as if that explained everything. "And my husband is from the Southern Isles," Eliza countered. "When I married him, half the village said it was unnatural to marry a foreigner with dark skin and strange customs. But you all came around eventually. Maybe it is time to come around again." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "This is different, Eliza." "How? Because you say so?" She shook her head. "I am ashamed of all of you. Go home. Leave my brother and his friend in peace." For a long moment no one moved. Then Marcus lowered his bow and sighed. "I will give you 1 week, Fletcher. If the orc is still here after that, we will have to take more serious action. I am sorry, but that is the best I can do. The other villages will hear about this, and there will be pressure to act." "A week," Fletcher agreed, though his jaw was tight. The men rode away, though Thomas shot one last hateful glare over his shoulder. When they were gone, Eliza immediately hugged Fletcher tight. "You idiot," she said affectionately. "You wonderful, stubborn idiot." "Thank you for coming," Fletcher said. Eliza pulled back and looked at Nara. "I meant what I said. Anyone who helps my brother is welcome in my eyes." She offered her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Nara shook it. "Now let me see this farm you two have been rebuilding." They spent the rest of the day showing Eliza the work they had done. She was impressed, Fletcher could tell, though she tried to hide it. That evening, the three of them sat around the kitchen table, and Eliza told wild stories about her merchant husband and their travels along the coast. Nara listened with fascination, asking questions about the places Eliza had seen. But when Eliza retired to the guest room for the night, the mood turned somber. Fletcher and Nara sat by the fire, not speaking for a long time. "I have to leave," Nara said finally. "You know I do." "That man, Marcus, gave us a week, but it does not matter. More will come. I will not let you be hurt because of me." "Where will you go?" Fletcher asked. "I do not know. Away. Somewhere humans and orcs do not meet." She looked down at her hands. "Somewhere alone." Fletcher's chest ached at the thought. These past weeks with Nara had been the happiest he could remember. She had become part of his daily life, as natural as breathing. The thought of her leaving, of never seeing her again, was unbearable. "Or you could stay," he said quietly. "Fletcher, not here, not at the farm." He turned to face her fully. "Eliza told me about a place once, far to the north past the borderlands. She heard about it from traders. It is called Crossroads, a settlement where humans and orcs live together in peace. Where people who do not fit anywhere else can make a new life." Nara's eyes widened. "I have heard rumors of such a place, but I thought it was a myth." "Eliza says it is real, difficult to reach, but real." Fletcher took her hand. "Come with me, Nara. Let us go together. I have nothing left here but a flooded farm and people who want to drive us apart. We could start fresh, together. You would give up your home, the land your father left you." "This land is just dirt and water," Fletcher said. "You are so much more." Tears gathered in Nara's eyes. "I do not deserve you. You deserve everything." Fletcher reached up and gently touched her face. "I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other for weeks, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You are strong and brave and beautiful, and when I think about my future, you are in it. If you will have me." A tear rolled down Nara's green cheek. "I thought I was alone in feeling this. I thought it was just my foolish heart." "Not foolish," Fletcher whispered. "Never foolish." Nara closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was tentative at first, uncertain, but then Fletcher wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close, and she responded with a passion that took his breath away. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Yes," Nara said. "Yes, I will come with you. I will go anywhere with you." They held each other by the firelight, and Fletcher felt as if his heart might burst from joy. Tomorrow would bring challenges. There would be preparations to make, a journey to plan, goodbyes to say. But tonight, in this moment, they had each other, and that was enough. The next week passed in a flurry of activity. Eliza, bless her heart, threw herself into helping them prepare. She used her merchant connections to gather supplies and information about the route to Crossroads. Fletcher sold what was left of his farm to a neighbor who had always wanted to expand his land, getting far less than it was worth but grateful for anything. He kept only what they could carry: tools, food, warm clothes, and a few precious items that had belonged to his parents. The village watched with a mixture of confusion and disapproval as Fletcher prepared to leave, but no one tried to stop them. Marcus came by one more time, not to threaten but to say goodbye. "I do not understand your choice," Marcus said, standing on Fletcher's porch. "But I have known you since you were a boy, and you have always been a good man. I hope you find what you are looking for." "Thank you," Fletcher said, shaking his hand. "That means more than you know." On the morning they were set to leave, Eliza hugged them both fiercely. "You send me letters," she demanded. "I want to know you made it safely, and if this Crossroads place is half as interesting as I imagine, maybe my husband and I will come visit." "You would be welcome," Nara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Eliza, for seeing me as a person." "That is all anyone really wants," Eliza replied, "to be seen." Fletcher and Nara set out at dawn, their packs heavy with supplies, walking north toward an uncertain future. The journey would take weeks, possibly months. They would face dangers on the road: bandits, wild animals, hostile settlements, but they would face them together. That first night they made camp in a small clearing off the road. Fletcher built a fire while Nara set up their tent. They ate a simple meal of dried meat and hard bread, then sat close together under the stars. "Are you afraid?" Nara asked. Fletcher considered the question. "A little, but mostly I am excited. For the first time in my life, I feel like I am choosing my own path instead of just following the one laid out for me." "I feel the same." Nara leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you for choosing this path with me." "Always," Fletcher promised. They traveled north for 6 weeks, through forests and over hills, across rivers and around mountains. Some days were easy, with clear weather and good roads. Other days were hard, with rain that soaked them through or paths so rough they could barely manage a few miles. They met other travelers occasionally, some friendly, some hostile, most just wary of the unusual pair. In a small town on the border, they were refused service at an inn. The innkeeper took one look at Nara and said he wanted no trouble. Fletcher felt his anger rising, but Nara just squeezed his hand and led him away. They camped outside of town that night, and Fletcher held her while she cried quietly for all the rejection she had faced in her life. "I am sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I am so sorry people have treated you this way." "It is not your fault," Nara said, "but thank you for caring. Thank you for seeing past what I am." "I see exactly what you are," Fletcher corrected gently. "I see all of you, and I love what I see." It was the first time either of them had used that word, and it hung in the air between them, precious and fragile. Nara pulled back to look at him, her amber eyes searching his face. "You love me." "I do. I love you, Nara Vorgath. I think I have since the day I pulled you from that flood and you tried to kneel at my feet, and I knew I had to raise you up instead. Because that is where you belong. Standing tall. Standing with me." Nara kissed him with a desperation that spoke of years of loneliness, of never believing she would find someone who saw her as worthy of love. "I love you too," she said against his lips. "I love you so much it frightens me." "Do not be frightened," Fletcher said. "We have each other now. Whatever comes, we face it together." They reached the northern borderlands as autumn began to turn the leaves gold and red. The terrain grew rougher, the settlements fewer and farther between. They met a trader who confirmed they were headed the right direction for crossroads, though he warned them the last leg of the journey was the hardest. "Pass through the stonewood," he said, pointing to a dark forest on the horizon. 3 days straight north once you are through. You will know crossroads when you see it. Has a wall made of timber and stone built by humans and orcs working together. First of its kind. "Thank you," Fletcher said, pressing a coin into the trader's hand. The stonewood was aptly named. Ancient trees grew among rocky outcroppings, making the path treacherous. On their second day in the forest, they heard voices. Orc voices, speaking in the harsh language that Nara had occasionally used when she thought Fletcher could not hear. "Wait here," Nara said quietly. "Let me see who they are." "Not a chance," Fletcher replied. "We stay together." They moved carefully through the trees until they found the source of the voices, a small group of orcs, 4 of them, armed and arguing about something. When they spotted Nara and Fletcher, the argument stopped immediately. "Well, well," one of the orcs said in the common tongue, his voice mocking. "What do we have here?" "A traitor and her pet human, Nara Vorgath," another orc said, recognition dawning on his scarred face. "The coward who refused to fight." "I am no coward," Nara said evenly. "I simply chose not to make war on children. And now you travel with one of them." The first orc spat on the ground. "You disgust me." "Then let us pass and you will never have to see us again," Nara said. But the orcs moved to block their path. "I think not. You have dishonored our kind by lying with a human. There is a price for that." Fletcher saw the intent in their eyes and stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Nara. "She has done nothing wrong. We are simply traveling north. We want no trouble." "Too late for that," the scarred orc said, drawing his blade. What followed happened fast. The orcs rushed forward and Fletcher did the only thing he could. He fought. He was not a warrior, just a farmer, but desperation gave him strength. He managed to grab a fallen branch and use it to deflect the first blow. Beside him, Nara fought with the trained efficiency of a warrior, disarming one attacker and using his weapon against another. but they were outnumbered. Fletcher took a cut across his ribs that sent pain shooting through his body. He stumbled, and one of the orcs raised a blade to finish him. Then Nara was there, throwing herself between Fletcher and the blade. The weapon caught her across the shoulder, and she cried out but did not fall. Instead, she grabbed the attacker and threw him bodily into a tree with enough force that he did not get up. The remaining orcs, seeing two of their companions down and the ferocity with which Nara fought to protect Fletcher, decided this was not worth it. They grabbed their wounded and fled into the forest. Fletcher caught Nara as she swayed, blood streaming from the wound on her shoulder. "You are hurt," he said, his hands shaking as he tried to assess the damage. "It is not deep," Nara gasped, "but we need to move. They might come back with others." They stumbled through the forest for another hour before Fletcher insisted they stop. Nara was growing weak from blood loss, and his own injury was making him dizzy. They found a sheltered spot among the rocks, and Fletcher used their precious water supply to clean Nara's wound. "You could have died," he said as he wrapped strips of cloth torn from his shirt around her shoulder. "You should have let me take that blow." "Never," Nara said fiercely. "I will never let that happen. You are my life now, Fletcher. I would die 1,000 times before I let anyone harm you. And you are mine," Fletcher said, tying off the bandage. "Which is why you are never to scare me like that again." Despite everything, Nara smiled. "I cannot promise that. You are too good at getting into trouble." They held each other as the sun set, two wounded souls who had found something precious in each other. Fletcher's rib throbbed and Nara's shoulder bled through the bandages, but they were alive, and they were together. The next morning they pushed on, moving slowly but steadily north. Both were in pain, but the thought of reaching Crossroads drove them forward. On the afternoon of the third day after leaving the Stonewood, they crested a hill and saw it. A settlement spread across a valley, larger than Fletcher had expected. And there, just as the trader had described, was a wall made of timber and stone, clearly built by different hands working in harmony. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from this distance they could see figures moving about, both human and orc, working side by side. "We made it," Nara breathed. "It is real. It is actually real." Fletcher pulled her close, mindful of her injury. "We made it together." They walked down the hill toward their new home, and as they approached the gates, they saw a mixed group of guards, human and orc, both watching them approach. An older human man with gray in his beard stepped forward. "Welcome to Crossroads," he said. "You both look like you have had a rough journey." "We have," Fletcher admitted, "but we are here now. We want to make a new life here if you will have us." The man looked between them, taking in their injuries, their worn clothes, and the way they stood close together. A smile creased his weathered face. "We have room for anyone who is willing to work and live in peace. Come, let us get those wounds tended, and then we can talk about where you might fit in here." They followed him through the gates, and Fletcher felt something loosen in his chest. All around them, humans and orcs were going about their daily business, trading, talking, working together. Children of both races played in the streets. It was not perfect, he could see that. There was still wariness in some eyes, still separation in how people grouped themselves. But it was a start. It was hope. They were taken to a healer, a human woman with gentle hands who tutted over their injuries and cleaned and rebound them properly. Then the gray, bearded man, who introduced himself as Robert, founder of Crossroads, showed them around the settlement. "We have farms on the outskirts that always need workers," Robert said. "Or if you have other skills, we can find a place for you. The important thing is that everyone contributes. We built this place on the idea that humans and orcs can live together if they are willing to try." "I am a farmer," Fletcher said, "and Nara is strong and skilled with building. Robert nodded approvingly. Good. We can use both. There is a plot of land on the eastern side that has been sitting empty. Previous owners decided to move on to the coast. It is yours if you want it. House needs some work, but it is sound. Fletcher and Nara looked at each other. We will take it, they said in unison, then laughed. Robert smiled. Excellent. Take today to rest and recover. Tomorrow I will take you out there and you can see what you think. They were given a room in a communal house for the night, and after a simple meal, they lay together in a real bed for the first time in weeks. Fletcher wrapped his arms around Nara, careful of her shoulder, and she rested her head on his chest. Is this real? She asked quietly. Or am I dreaming? If you are, then I am having the same dream, Fletcher replied. We made it, Nara, we actually made it. What happens now? Now we build a life, together. We work the land, fix up that house, maybe make some friends. We wake up every morning and choose each other again. He kissed the top of her head. And someday, if you are willing, I would like to marry you, properly, in front of witnesses. Show this whole settlement that we are not afraid of what we feel. Nara pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You would marry me, truly. I would marry you today if possible, Fletcher said seriously. I love you, Nara. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you have me? Yes, Nara said, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They married 3 weeks later, once their injuries had healed and they had moved into their new home. Robert performed the ceremony in the center of the settlement, and to Fletcher's surprise, nearly everyone in Crossroads turned out to watch. Humans and orcs stood side by side as Fletcher and Nara exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life brought. When Robert pronounced them married, Fletcher kissed his wife, and the crowd cheered. Even some of the more stoic orcs were smiling. Eliza would have been so proud. That night at the celebration feast, an old orc woman approached Nara. I heard you were cast out for refusing to fight children, she said. Nara tensed, but the woman continued. That was brave. Foolish, perhaps, but brave. You chose honor over obedience. That is the mark of a true warrior. Nara's eyes widened. Thank you. Your husband seems like a good man, the woman added, glancing at Fletcher, who was attempting to dance with some human children who had attached themselves to his legs. You chose well. I did, Nara agreed, warmth spreading through her chest. I really did. Months passed, then a year. Fletcher and Nara worked their land together, planting crops in the spring and harvesting in the fall. Their house slowly transformed from a worn structure into a real home, with repairs made and personal touches added. They made friends among both humans and orcs in Crossroads, hosting dinners and attending gatherings. It was not always easy. There were still people who disapproved of their marriage, who muttered about the unnaturalness of it. There were moments of frustration and misunderstanding, times when cultural differences caused friction. But they worked through it all, learning and growing together. On the anniversary of the day Fletcher had pulled Nara from the flood, they stood together on their porch, watching the sun set over their fields. Nara's hand rested on her rounded belly. She was 4 months pregnant, carrying their first child. You ever regret it? Nara asked softly. Giving up your home, leaving everything you knew, Fletcher pulled her close, his hand joining hers on her belly. Not for a single moment. That farm was where I survived. This, he gestured to their land, their home, the settlement beyond, this is where I live, with you, building something new. Our child will never know the hatred we faced, Nara said. They will grow up here, where love matters more than species. They will know that their parents loved each other enough to change the world, Fletcher corrected, even if it was just their own small corner of it. They stood together as the stars began to appear, Two souls who had found each other in the midst of a flood and chosen to build a life that defied everything they had been taught. It was not perfect. It was not easy. But it was theirs, and it was filled with love, and that was more than enough. In the house behind them, a fire crackled in the hearth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new joys. But tonight, they had this moment standing together, hand in hand, looking toward a future they had created together. A future built on the simple truth that love, real love, sees beyond the surface to the person beneath. That sometimes the greatest act of courage is not fighting against others, but fighting for the person you love. And as Fletcher turned to lead Nara inside, he thought about that day in the flood, when she had tried to kneel at his feet in gratitude, and he had raised her up instead. It had been the right choice then, and it remained the right choice now. They stood as equals, as partners, as two halves of one whole. Together, they had found something that many spend their whole lives searching for: a place to belong, and someone to belong with. And that, Fletcher thought as he closed the door behind them, was the greatest treasure of all.